All right, so our client that we're working with today is a public university, and they are considering adding an intercollegiate football program to their athletic program at their school. Their only financial requirement is to break even. They're also interested in the non-tangible or intangible benefits as well. Longer term, they hope to pay for a new stadium and use football to subsidize other sports programs on their campus. Here's some additional information about the school and the university as a whole. Enrollment is currently 10,000 students. The school is near a city of about 1 million residents. It's located in the southern U.S., where football is quite popular. And the school feels that adding a football program has many benefits, including increased exposure and brand awareness, school pride, enhanced college experience for students, and improved connections with alumni, as well as additional revenues that they could bring in. The school currently participates in 16 men's and women's sports, including basketball, track and field, baseball, etc. So they're asking us to help them determine whether or not this is a good idea moving forward. So what factors would you want to assess to determine whether it's a good idea to add an intercollegiate football program to their athletic program at their school?
Great. That all sounds good. I'm just going to go ahead and quickly recap everything you said, make sure I heard everything correctly. So our client today is a public university, and they're wondering whether or not they should add an intercollegiate football program to their athletics program. Their only financial goal is to break even, and they're quite interested in the financial benefits or the intangible benefits of adding this football team to their athletics program. They're hoping it'll subsidize some other athletic programs and also bring camaraderie, alumni support, and many other benefits to the school. Did I get all that right?
That sounds about correct.
Super. Well, with that, let me see. I don't have any questions at this point, so I'll probably go ahead and take a couple moments and come up with a structure, and then we'll dive into it.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. I have a brief structure here. So I have three main buckets. The first one is our revenue bucket. The second is what the costs would be. And the third is our intangible benefits. These are the three main elements I'd like to assess here to determine whether or not they should add this intercollegiate football program. First, diving into the revenue bucket, I'm really interested in the potential market for those who would be attending the games. How much money is really possible to raise here and to justify all the costs of this new stadium and the football team. Second, what prices would we be able to charge for the games? And then third, what channels are we going to use to access our customers for this new stadium and the football program, and additional costs associated with those. Second, diving into the costs bucket. I really want to know what are the costs to subsidize the other athletic programs, as this seems to be a major concern for the client. What are the costs of this new stadium, along with any other fixed costs of setting up the program? And lastly, what are the variable costs associated with this program, specifically with the games, and then how many games they would have a year, and so forth. And lastly, I'm curious about the intangible benefits here, which is also a big concern of the clients. Particularly, first, what a benefit would alumni bring to this new program, and how could alumni potentially bring in more money to the school and other programs by having this new intercollegiate football program? Second, how would this benefit the students at the school, particularly those involved with the football program and other athletics? And third, kind of questioning a potential risk of this, which would it be taking away from other athletic programs here? It seems that there could be a lot of benefits, but I also want to assess the risks.
Mm-hmm. Great. So before I dive in and give you some additional data, could you tell me a little bit more with the revenues, any other potential revenue streams that you could anticipate being able to be generated from this program?
Yeah, well, there's, of course, so the revenue of the games themselves, people coming to pay for the games, if it's going to be televised, particularly any financial benefits from it being televised. Also, if we're selling anything at the games, such as food, gear, kind of merchandise related to the football team.
Mm-hmm. And then regarding the cost, the fixed and variable that you mentioned, could you give me a couple examples within those of what you think the major costs might be?
Sure. So for fixed costs, the major cost is going to be building this new stadium. And then in addition to that, any fixed cost regarding setting up the team, if we need training equipment, any other, uniforms, all the gear that the team would need. Also employment, if we're going to have to hire on new people to coach the team and run all of the football program. And then as far as variable costs, how much will it cost to set everything up per game? That's about it.
Okay, so let me provide you with some additional data to get you started.
Wonderful.
So as a result of this football program, we estimate that we can increase tuition and student fees by $250 per student per year. They're also expecting to be paid $300,000 for an away game, of which there would be 6 away games in a season. Regarding ticket sales, they're estimating to charge $25 for a home game, and there would be 6 of those as well. And they're expecting an attendance of 7,000 attendees per game in their first season. This is going to exclude student attendees. They get in for free. And then lastly, they're expecting to receive $1 million a year from alumni support. So what would be the anticipated annual revenues of this program in the first year?
I just want to clarify a couple of things, make sure I got all these numbers right before I jump in. So based on the new football program, we would be able to increase tuition by $250 per student per year. Mm-hmm. We would be able to charge make $3,000 per away game. And how many of those did you say there would be again?
So 6 away games for the season, it's $300,000 per game.
$300,000. Got it. Thank you. And $25 per person per home game. And there would be 3 home games, right?
6. Same as the away games. Mm-hmm.
Same as the away. Thank you. There would be 7,000 attendees per game, excluding students. And then we would be able to bring in $1 million estimated from alumni.
Correct.
Okay, great. And then we want to figure out how much revenue total they would be able to bring in this first year from the football program. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, diving into this first, I want to calculate this first number, this tuition and fees increase. So if I look back to my notes from before, we have 10,000 students that attend this university. So times that $250 increase gives us an additional $2,500 in revenue per year from tuition increases.
What was that number again?
2,500. Oops, sorry, forgot a zero. 25,000.
Double check that. I think you have 10,000 times 250.
Yes. Oh, I don't know. 2 zeros. 250,000. From
Check that once more.
increase. Oh goodness, the zeros always trip me up. Okay, so 250 times 10,000. Hold on. Let's see here. So that would actually 2.5 million.
Very good.
There we go. My bad. Okay, moving on to revenue brought in from the away games. We have $300,000 times 6. Give us $900,000 from that.
And double check that figure once more.
We have $300,000 times 6. 6 times 3, 18. 1.8 million brought in from that. Thank you. And then for the home games, we charge $25 per person times our 7,000 attendees. So let's see here. Well, 25 times 5 would give us 125 plus 50 equals 175. Add on the 3 zeros. So we would bring in, let's see, 170K per game. Now we need to multiply this by the number of games, which is 6.
And then just double check. I think you're missing a little bit on the end of that number.
Oh. 25. Okay. There we go. 1.75 million on that one. Is that?
I think you got the numbers. Got an extra 0.
Oh. All right. So that number, let's see. Right. Said extra 0 on that one. So we actually have, wait a minute. So we have 175,000 for that one, made per game, multiplied by 6 games total. Got 175,000 by 6. 5 times 6, 30. Times 7, 42. Six. Okay. So we have from here. So 175,000 multiplied out by 6 would give us 750,000 total from our home games. So now we need to add
double
up.
check that real quick. I think walk me through how you did that one.
Sure. So I multiplied that 175,000 by 6 to get that number, which I'm guessing I must have multiplied out wrong. Let's see here. So, well, I did, let's see, multiplying it out, 6 times 5, got 30, carry the 3, 6 times 7 is 42, add the 3, get 45, carry the 4, 6, oh, I see what I did wrong. Okay, 6 times 4 gives us 24, not, okay. So we have 2.45 million made from home games. Is that right?
Let's use
Oh, no.
1.05 as the number.
Okay.
1.05 million.
1.05.
There we go.
Goodness. Okay. So now that we have all these numbers, we're going to add them all up. So you said 1.05 million?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay. So we'll take the original. We got, let's see, 2.5 million from the tuition and fees increase, plus the 1.8 million from our away games. Let's see, and then finally from the home games, we got 1.05 million, and then finally that additional million from the alumni. I'm going to add each of these up. Okay, to get 6.35 million total.
Mm-hmm.
Is the total revenue that we would get from adding this year from the collegiate program.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're gonna have to figure out the cost side to see if the costs of this or the revenues are going to enable us to break even with the costs, or perhaps even have a profit here so that we could spend it on subsidizing other programs.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I do have some cost data for you. I've got quite a few data points, so be prepared to write.
Okay.
So here's some information on their cost structure. So they'll need to provide financial aid or scholarships to 52 football players. Financial aid includes tuition, fees, books, and room and board. The breakdown is as follows. So tuition and fees is $14,000 per student per year. Room and board, $12,000, and books, $2,000. That's all per student per year. They're anticipating to hire a head coach at $500,000 per year. They will need to hire 8 assistants at an average of $125,000 per year. And the team will require support staff such as trainers, tutors, etc. for the team. We're estimating a total of 25 new employees at a cost of $60,000 per year on average. Travel to the away games will cost $80,000 per year. $80,000 per game. Recruiting costs will be $200,000 per year. And it will cost $1,500 per year per player for things like uniforms, equipment, etc. And there will be an estimated of 80 total players on the team. The school can rent a small stadium from the city, and they're estimating that to be $100,000 per game. Okay, so what would be the total cost for the program for the year?
All right. Okay, so quite a few numbers here. I'm going to start with calculating out the scholarship data that you gave me. So first, let's see, we are giving out 52 scholarships per student per year, and that includes our tuition, room and board, and books. So adding up the $14,000 tuition plus the $12,000 in room and board plus the $2,000 in books, we get a total of $28,000 per student times 52. So multiplying 28,000 per year times 52 scholarships. Let's see here. 8 times 2 gives us 16. 8 times 5 is 40. Carry the 1. 41. Now 416 plus, let's see here. 2 times 2 is 4. And 5 times 2 is 10. So we have 416 plus 1040 gives us 1,000. Let's see. And then add on the 3 zeros. So we have 1.456 million
Very good.
from the scholarships. I'll label this in my paper here. Okay. All right, next I have written down 500,000 per year for the coach. We'll save that to the end because that's just a single number. All right, next I want to calculate out our 8 assistants cost. So I have written down here 8 assistants to hire at 125,000 each. Is that number correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, 8 multiplied out by 125,000. 8 times 5 is 40. 1, 8 times 2 is 16. Plus 4 is 20. And then we have 3. So 300. Let's see, 3 million on that coach or the assistants for the year total.
Okay, walk me through that again.
Sure. So I multiplied out 8 times 125,000. Let's see, to get 3 million. Let's see. Trying to see. All right, let me try it one more time. Okay, 8 times 125,000.
Let's break that down. So what would be the 8
Okay.
times the 100,000?
8 times 100,000 is 800,000.
Okay.
And then 8 times 25,000 would be an extra 200K.
Good.
To give us 1 million total, which is a lot easier than what I did. Okay. And then, all right, so we have 1 million on the assistants. Moving on to the next number, we have 25 new employees at 60K per year each. Okay, so 25, let's do this, 25 times 10 is going to be 250. Thousand, and then multiply that by 6 to get 250,000 times 4 would be 1 million plus 1.5 million.
Good.
And that would be for the 25 new employees. Okay, next number I have is the 80,000 per year or per game. And that's for home and away games.
For the travel?
Oh, my bad. So that's the travel for the away games alone.
away.
And let me look back, which we have 6 a year of. So we need to multiply that 80,000 times 6. 8 times 6 is 40. 80 times 6 would be 400. Add the 3 zeros from the 1,000, so we have 400,000.
What was that 6 times 8 number you said?
Oh, it's not 4. Let's see. 6 times 8. 5 times 8 is 40. 6 times 8 is 48. My bad. So we get 40. That's 480,000 would be.
Okay.
Per year spent on away games. Now, let's see, where is the next data point on our list? Spent on away games. Recruiting fees are 200,000 per year, which is fixed costs. Don't need to multiply that out. Then we have $1,500 per player, and we have 80 players total. So let's see here. Well, 1,500 times 10 would be 15,000 times 8. Let's see, it would be 30 times times 8. 8 times 5 is 40. Carry the 4 times 1 is 8. Plus 4 gives us 12. 4. Okay, so that would give us. That would give us 120,000 spent on player uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and now to our last data point, we have 100,000 per game for the stadium. So this is for our home games,
Correct.
which we have 6 of. So 100K times 6, nice and easy for this last one, 600,000. Great. Okay, now it's time to add up all of these numbers together. So we have, going back to the beginning, we have 1.456 million on scholarships, plus our 1 million in assistant costs, plus our 1.5 million in, let's see, I believe that's our employee costs.
Mm-hmm. That was the staff, I think, with the 1.5.
Staff, thank you. Let's see, and then 120K for, let's see, what was that one? Again, that was for our per game, our per away game travel costs, plus 600,000 per home game costs, and then lastly 480,000 of our away game costs, which I think I said something else was, but I have all the numbers circled, just didn't label correctly. Okay, so we're gonna add up all of these. I'm gonna start with.
And did you also capture the coach and then also the recruiting as well?
No, actually, thank you. Okay, plus 500K for our coach, plus 200K for recruiting. Okay, so I'm going to start with my millions, just make sure I count everything correctly. Okay, so we have 1.5 million plus 1 million, 2.5 million, plus 1.456 million. I'm just going to round that to 1.5 for ease. So we have 4 million there, and then I'm going to add up our thousands now. So I have 600,000 plus 120,000, give us 720,000 plus 480. To give us 1.2 million. And then, let's see, we need to add on here an additional 700K. So we have 5.2 million plus 700K. So we have a total of 5.9 million approximately in costs for total per year for the football team. Now let's go ahead and look back at our revenue number, which is 6.35 million I have here compared to our costs of 5.9 million. So it does seem that we're able to break even and make a small amount of profit, approximately almost, let's see, about $300,000 worth of profit. So the question here is this enough profit for the university to be able to cover the subsidizing the other athletic programs? It does meet their criteria of breaking even, which is great, and seems that they should make the decision.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now let's think about the longer term. So in the short term, it does break even. Let's assume that the client went ahead with implementing the football program, and the team has had surprising success and has gained the attention of a more powerful athletic conference, a league. But gaining membership into this conference would drastically raise the profile of the school and lead to incremental revenue, is their hope. However, in order to gain acceptance into the conference, they need to build a bigger stadium. So they're hoping to build a 25,000 seat stadium on site on campus. And so what factors would you want to consider in determining if that's a good idea or not? What data would you need to better assess that?
Sure. So, okay, let's see. I would need to know whether or not this specific amount of revenue brought in by this new league that they're going to be a part of would justify the cost of the new stadium. So I would need to know the specific revenue potential of the new stadium being in the new league compared to the cost of building out this new stadium. And if this is going to include investment costs, I would also want to know the payback period of how long it's going to, how many years we need to make profits from this new, being in this new league in order to pay back that initial investment of building the stadium.
Mm-hmm. So walk me through a little bit more of the anticipated changes in revenues and costs that you might anticipate.
Sure. Let's see. So on the revenue side, it said that we were going to join this new league, and through joining that, we would get a lot more attention. And I'm thinking that this could potentially include some sort of televising of the events, additional revenue that we may not have to pay as many variable costs for, or as high a variable cost for if it's being televised versus where everyone there is watching the event only. But I am curious too, I feel that I'm missing something about, or I missed something that you said about joining the new league and the new attention that this would bring. Was there something specific that you said?
Not in particular, just overall raising the profile of the school to bring in additional revenues along with the bigger stadium.
Got it. The other thing I'm remembering from before is that the last football program was able to increase tuition. I'm wondering if we would be able to increase tuition again due to the increased publicity and perhaps even expand the capacity of the school, the number of students attending. But that would also include a lot of other capacities. And then on the cost side, the stadium is going to be the big cost. And then I'm also curious as to the costs of joining this league, if there are any participation or contract fees that we'll have to pay. Will we have to expand our football team in terms of its numbers or the amount of coaches and support staff? So any of those variable costs, and then additionally any other fixed costs that might come with the program. Additionally, especially if there's more travel involved.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's assume that they go ahead with the football stadium, or let's assume that, maybe not that they go ahead with it, but let's assume that we've run some numbers for it, and it would in fact break even. However, that would not meet the requirement of subsidizing their other sporting activities.
Okay.
And so, question for you here is, what are some additional ideas or ways that we could boost the overall profit coming from the football program moving forward?
Sure. Quick question first, though. Is this assuming that the entire stadium at these games is completely full, or do we have any data on if there are additional seats, or are we at capacity for how many people can watch the game?
Let's assume that we have about an 80% capacity within the 25,000 seat stadium. But in addition to that, what are some other ways that we could boost profits from the football program?
Of course. So boosting profits from the football program, I mean, first, not doing anything extra, we could look at raising ticket prices. That alone would help to increase our profit margin above our costs. We could also look at certain ways of publicizing our football team, whether that be in traditional media such as television, or utilizing some social media platforms in order to gain awareness and raise revenues for the team that way. We could also look at potential merchandising of gear for the football team, selling more gear at our games, selling more gear online to fans from afar. And lastly, relates to the first question I came up with, but finding ways to increase the amount of attendees at the game, perhaps even creating some events such as tailgates or things before the game where you would have revenue going towards the football stadium that wasn't just the game itself, but more so before and after game events.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anything else?
That's all I have.
Okay. All right. So I don't have any additional data for you. So you've run into, let's say, the dean of the university, and they would like to know your final recommendations about their football program. So what would you say to the dean?
All right. Let's see, final recommendations. Okay. So I say since the beginning of our project, we've determined that, in the beginning, creating the football team, we were able to figure out that we could not only break even, but create some additional profit from the football team that we were able to use to subsidize some athletic programs. Now that we've decided to go ahead and join this bigger league and build the 25,000 foot stadium, we're now breaking even with the football team. However, we have some really creative ideas for how we can increase our profit margin and increase revenues so that we're able to have additional profit to use to subsidize the other programs. These include boosting our ticket prices in order to increase our profit margin, increasing our media exposure through traditional media and also social media, and lastly, boosting the capacity of the stadium, and also creating some before and after game events where we could raise additional revenue for the football team and the school in order to have a profitable future where we can continue funding all of our athletics.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Case done. Okay, you can take a breather. You're off the hot seat for now. All right, so we'll go back. I'll kind of give you some feedback throughout, but I want to get your initial reaction to the case. How did that feel going through this one, especially with a couple hundred people watching?
Definitely, yeah, in the hot seat. It's funny being on the other side of this because I've watched a lot of these live case videos, especially last fall. So it was cool to be on the other side, but specifically reacting to the case itself, it was cool to be able to relate to the case, I guess, as a college student and know a little bit more context of how those games work, even though I don't know too much about the athletic scene. But I like the case. There was definitely a lot of math, and I got tripped up on a couple of things, but thank you for getting me to the right numbers. And it was cool to see once getting through all the math, to really look at all my sheets of paper and look at, okay, here's the revenues, here's the costs, and here's how we can compare in order to determine what needs to be done. So yeah, okay. Great case.
Awesome. So let's go back. Whenever I do feedback in a case, I always just kind of break down each of the individual sections and kind of talk through each part of the case and then kind of summarize it at the end. So in terms of the intro, so the recap was good. I think you got down the gist of the information. I'd love to see some clarifying questions. I noticed that you said you didn't have any at the moment. This case honestly is fairly straightforward in terms of the content. Nothing is really unusual about the business model or definitionally. Everything is pretty clear. The one thing I would really ask for is if they have a time frame for their break even. Are they thinking about in the first year, or is this 5 years down the road, etc. So that could be a parameter that we could ask for. So other than that, the prompt itself I think is fairly straightforward for this case. I always tell people just to confirm the objective before you start, being our goal is to break even, as well as confirm the intangible benefits and consider that as well. That, if you notice your objective, that will lead directly into the structure, which I think you did a good job of. We've got the revenues and costs to get to the break even, and then the intangible benefits. So that I always really stress this when I go through cases, that objective, regardless of the background, the objective is what will really drive the structure moving forward. So I think the structure was well tailored to fit the case. 3 clearly defined buckets: revenues, costs, and the intangibles. The only thing I wrote down within there, if you noticed, I asked you to kind of go back and tell me a little bit more about the revenues and the costs so that it was a little bit more specific. So within the revenues, like what kind of revenue streams are we talking about? Within the variable and fixed costs, some examples of that. And then you'll kind of see later in the case that was some of the data provided later on. So that's the goal of the structure, right, is to anticipate the data and analysis coming later. So overall, high-level structure looks good, just getting a little bit more specific with some of those examples. Okay, then we hit the math portion. So the math portion, I have to commend you, Brave, for doing all of this live case interview. It's always easy when you're sitting there by yourself, but when you're in front of everybody else, it's 10 times more difficult. But if you're ready to do that here, I think you should be good elsewhere. So in terms of the revenues and the costs, so let's take a look at these. One thing in terms of the math, I would suggest is pushing the structure at the beginning. So I always tell my clients, make sure you have basically an Excel spreadsheet on your paper before you start. And so what I would do is I'd have the labels, right? So for the revenues, it's tuition and fees, game, the home tickets, and then the alumni. For the cost, right, on my paper, I'd say, okay, looks like there's several costs here. So first we have tuition, or the financial aid, number 1, head coach, the assistants, support staff, travel, recruiting, uniform and equipment, and then the rent. So I would have those categories written down, and I would say, hey, I'm just setting up a table. Let me get those down real quick. That way, in the end, when you come back to try to net them all together, you don't have to look for it, right? It's just labeled nice and clean. So I always tell people in consulting, you live in Excel, structure your math like an Excel spreadsheet at the beginning. It'll make things 10 times easier. It's a little bit of setup that goes a long way.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's see here. The other thing with the math, I would say just with the mental math, this is very difficult live. It's probably a little extra nerve-wracking. Just watch those zeros, right? Looking for the shortcuts. Couple quick tips on that. One thing I encourage people to do is write out your full calculation first, and then you can kind of pick and choose the math you want to do to make it easier. So at one point we had this was on the revenues, the home game tickets. So we have $25 times 7,000 individuals times 6 games. So looking at that, I probably would have done the 25 times the 6 first to get to 150. And then 150 times 7,000. I'm like, okay, I can do it times, let's say 100, and then half of that.
Yeah.
So if you have all of your calculations or numbers spread out, you can pick and choose the math that you want to do to make it a little easier on yourself. So just kind of picking up the pace of the mental math a little bit. And like I said, very difficult to do live. So probably a little extra challenging today. That was my main thing on the math. So just really pushing those mental math shortcuts just to pick up the speed. Okay.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I like the idea of the Excel sheet on the piece of paper a lot.
Yeah.
Definitely helpful for organization.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Then you do a job netting them off. So we have the revenues, compare that to the cost. So they are profitable, but probably not enough to subsidize. So then we got into the creative questions towards the end here. So the first creative question being the idea of building a 25,000 seat stadium and what data you would need for that. So that one, I think you bucketed those off, revenues and costs. This case, the structures don't get too creative on this one. It's a little bit more straightforward. But so you had those 2 categories, and you talk through each. Same thing that I would say for the opening structure, just getting a little bit more specific within those. So, for example, later on you mentioned the increase in ticket price, or if you're now in a league in terms of television and things like that, there's probably a lot of other potential revenues that we could generate. The cost might also be a lot higher, and just giving some more specific examples there. But overall, that looked good. And then the additional ways that we could boost profits. This one, I would just structure that one out again. Again, you can use the revenues and costs angle. For the revenues, for example, you always want to push structure as best as you can. This idea of being messy. So the way that I approach this one, I said we could either add additional revenue streams or increase the existing, or we could look at ways to reduce costs. And then what you could do is kind of just in that vein of being specific, you could go back to those categories that we had from before, like the assistants, the head coach, support staff, travel, the uniforms, and say, like, here's some things we could do to maybe address each of those. So just kind of going back and getting specific there. Awesome. Final recommendation. We have a recommendation to go ahead with this. The only thing I would say about the final recommendation, just make sure you get some numbers in there, which is always a little bit tricky towards the end.
Yeah.
But make sure you kind of go back and say, we have the 6.35 is what we calculated for the additional revenues. We married that against the cost at 5.9. And so 5.9 million. So it is profitable. And then just kind of supporting that with some numbers towards the end to make sure you incorporate those at the end of the case.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Any questions for me or any review of this case from your perspective, kind of having gone through it now?
I don't think I have any questions about the case. Most of your feedback addressed the points that I was uncertain about, such as the math. And I think, the tip about creating more structure wherever I can on those and creative questions was really great too. To always be creating a structure, not just reciting things off at random, but rather really structured format. So thank you so much for...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say thanks so much for your feedback.
Not a problem. I always joke around with my clients. I think McKinsey brainwashed me to structure absolutely everything. It's sort of a mindset, so you want to apply that to the case. The creative questions, the math, the charts, at the very beginning, obviously, but just structure throughout, and it makes it very methodical going through.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Wonderful.